Something died on the savannah this morning. Not violently, not dramatically. A wildebeest, old and slow, collapsed near a riverbed in what is now northern Tanzania. By noon, vultures had already opened the belly. Hyenas cracked the long bones. Jackals pulled at the remains. And then something else arrived. Not a predator, not quite. A small, upright figure, barefoot, maybe 4.5 feet tall. Fingers wrapped around a river cobble with a sharpened edge. It didn't roar. It didn't charge. It waited. And when the hyenas moved on, it knelt beside what was left and began to eat, raw. No flame, no smoke, no hearth, just teeth, stone, and hunger. That creature was your direct ancestor. And for roughly 4 million years, every single meal your lineage consumed looked exactly like that. What did it taste like? To be human before fire? Most people assume early humans ate like us, minus the seasoning. A bit of raw meat, some berries, a rough but recognizable diet. That's not what the evidence shows. In 2004, paleoanthropologist Peter Unger at the University of Arkansas began studying something overlooked for decades: microscopic scratches on fossilized teeth. Not the shape of the teeth, the damage. Every meal leaves a signature. Hard seeds leave pits, tough leaves leave long parallel striations. Soft fruit leaves almost nothing. When Ungar examined the molars of Australopithecus afarensis, the species of the famous fossil Lucy, who walked upright over 3 million years ago, he found something unexpected. The scratch patterns didn't match a single food type. They shifted. Season to season, year to year. What did that mean? It meant Lucy wasn't a specialist. She wasn't a carnivore. She wasn't an herbivore. She was something more desperate than either. She was an opportunist. Whatever was available, whatever wouldn't kill her immediately. Figs when there were figs, sedge stems in the wet season, insects pulled from bark. Occasionally the soft tissue of something already dead. No food was guaranteed. No meal was reliable. Every day was a negotiation with the landscape, and the landscape was not generous. Here is a fact that changes how you think about your own body. Raw food is calorically expensive to digest. Your stomach has to do mechanically and chemically what fire would later do externally: break down cell walls, denature proteins, neutralize toxins. This takes enormous energy. A chimpanzee today spends nearly 5 hours a day chewing. 5 hours, just to extract enough calories to survive until tomorrow. Your ancestors faced the same constraint, possibly worse. The savannas of East Africa were drying, forests were retreating. Fruit-bearing trees grew scarcer. The caloric margin between survival and starvation was razor thin. So how did they solve it? Not with intelligence. Not yet. Not with tools. Those came later. They solved it with their bodies. Their molars were enormous, far larger than yours. Their jaw muscles were anchored by a sagittal crest, a ridge of bone running along the top of the skull, like a mohawk made of skeleton. Species like Paranthropus boisei had such massive chewing apparatus that early researchers called them Nutcracker Man. But here's the disturbing part. That adaptation, those giant jaws, that brute force digestive strategy, it was an evolutionary dead end. Paranthropus went extinct. The lineage that survived, your lineage, found a different answer. Around 2.6 million years ago, something new appeared in the fossil record at a site called Gona in Ethiopia. Stone flakes, deliberately napped, sharp enough to slice hide, and beside them animal bones with cut marks. Not tooth marks, cut marks, made by stone edges dragged across bone. This is among the earliest direct evidence of systematic meat processing by hominins. But there's a critical detail that most retellings leave out. These early meat eaters were almost certainly not hunters. They were scavengers. Richard Wrangham, the Harvard biological anthropologist, whose 2009 book Catching Fire reshaped how we understand human evolution, has argued extensively that early Homo species lacked the speed, the weapons, and the cooperative strategy needed for large-game hunting. What they had was patience, observation, and stone tools sharp enough to access something no other scavenger could reach: marrow. After the lions fed, after the hyenas cracked what they could, after the vultures stripped the soft tissue, the bones remained. And inside those bones, sealed away from every competitor, was a dense fat-rich substance worth more calories per gram than almost anything else on the savanna. Your ancestors cracked bones open with rocks and ate the marrow raw. They split skulls and consumed brain tissue, soft, fatty, and uncontested. It was a niche no other animal occupied, not because it was difficult, because no other animal had the hands, the cognition, or the tools to do it. Was it elegant? No. Was it efficient? Extraordinarily. And it may have been the single dietary shift that funded the expansion of the human brain, but meat was unpredictable. A carcass might appear once a week, once a month. Scavenging is not a meal plan, it's a lottery. So what filled the gaps? For decades, the answer was assumed to be fruit and leaves. But in 2014, a study led by Amanda Henry, then at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, revealed something that had been hiding in plain sight. Starch granules, embedded in the calcified dental plaque of ancient hominins. Not just one specimen, multiple individuals, across multiple species. They were eating underground storage organs, tubers, rhizomes, corms, the swollen, starchy roots of plants that store energy beneath the soil. Think of a raw potato. Now imagine something tougher, more fibrous, bitter with alkaloids, gritty with soil. That is closer to the reality. These weren't pleasant to eat. They were hard to find. They required digging, sometimes with sticks, sometimes with bare hands. They required extensive chewing, but they were there, reliably, seasonally, predictably. And unlike fruit, which dozens of species competed for, underground tubers were largely ignored by other animals. They were a hidden reservoir of calories, accessible only to creatures willing to dig, process, and endure. This was not dining. This was survival architecture. Now consider what all of this did to the body. Raw meat carries parasites, tapeworms, roundworms, toxoplasma. Without fire to sterilize, every meal was a gamble with infection. Skeletal remains from early hominin sites show evidence of periostitis, bone inflammation consistent with chronic infection. Some researchers believe parasitic load was one of the primary causes of early mortality. Raw plants carry their own defenses. Alkaloids, tannins, oxalates, compounds evolved specifically to discourage consumption. Your ancestors couldn't detoxify them through cooking. They endured them. Their livers worked harder. Their guts were longer. Their bodies allocated enormous metabolic resources simply to process what they ate. And the time cost was staggering. Estimates suggest early hominins may have spent 40 to 60% of their waking hours on food acquisition and consumption. Not foraging casually, working constantly. What does that leave? Almost nothing for social bonding, for teaching, for innovation, for rest. The raw diet didn't just shape what early humans looked like, it shaped what they couldn't become. It was a ceiling, a biological bottleneck, a cage made of calories. And they lived inside it for millions of years. How do you escape a cage you don't know you're in? Here is what is rarely said. There was no single day when humans discovered fire, no lightning bolt of genius. The archaeological record suggests a long, ambiguous transition, perhaps spanning hundreds of thousands of years, where fire was encountered, feared, occasionally exploited, and then lost again. Sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa show traces of burned bone and ash dating to roughly 1 million years ago. But the evidence is thin. Scattered, debated, controlled, habitual fire use doesn't appear consistently until perhaps 400,000 years ago, which means there were countless generations caught in the middle. Generations that had seen fire, maybe tasted cooked meat once pulled from the edge of a natural blaze, maybe understood, dimly, that heat changed food, but couldn't reproduce it, couldn't control it, couldn't keep it. Imagine that, knowing, somewhere in the body, that there is a better way to eat, and having no way to reach it. That is the space your ancestors occupied, not ignorance, something worse. Almost knowledge. Richard Wrangham has pointed out something haunting. The human gut is too small. Compared to other primates of similar body mass, our intestines are significantly shorter. Our stomachs produce less acid. Our colons are reduced. Our teeth are almost absurdly small. These are not the features of a raw food species. These are the features of a species already adapted to processed food, which means by the time cooking became habitual, our bodies had been drifting toward it for hundreds of thousands of years, eating raw but slowly losing the anatomy that made raw eating viable. We were becoming dependent on a technology we hadn't yet secured. That's not a triumph. That's a vulnerability. And every time you eat a salad and feel unsatisfied, Every time raw celery feels like chewing through furniture, your body is remembering, not a preference, a limitation, written into the tissue, inherited from the ones who knelt beside carcasses and cracked bones under an open sky and could not yet understand why they were still hungry. Something died on the savannah this morning, and a creature knelt beside it and ate what was left, and survived another day, and had children who survived another day, and those children had children. For 4 million years, each one hungry, each one adapting, each one building cell by cell the body you now inhabit. You carry their gut, their cravings, their restless calorie-seeking anxiety. You reach for food without thinking and feel relief when you find it, and that relief is not yours. It is theirs, still echoing. You cooked dinner tonight, you seasoned it, you sat at a table, but somewhere in the architecture of your hunger, beneath the preferences, beneath the pleasure, beneath the culture, there is still a small, barefoot figure, kneeling, waiting for the hyenas to leave.